thank you very much for coming tonight. It's my pleasure to see you here, and it's my pleasure to have this opportunity to talk to you about something that I really care about, which is Antarctica, the Ross Sea, and the Ross Sea Marine Protected Area, i.e. the protection of the Ross Sea. Now, I've heard it said that there are two things that make New Zealand really special in the eyes of the world. That's rugby and Antarctica. Now, I don't know anything about rugby, so I'm going to talk about Antarctica. So, show of hands, who has seen the Last Ocean documentary? Excellent, so you know what this is all about. Show of hands, who's been to Antarctica? Excellent, so you have to excuse me if I tell you things you already know, so I just have to cover the basics. Let's get started. So before I launch into this evening's entertainment, I want to thank my colleagues and sponsors. I'm fortunate enough to lead the Torpedo Alliance of New Zealand, which is what Brian alluded to. We work on Antarctic megafauna, birds and mammals, and toothfish. Oops, sorry. There's a toothfish. And this involves several institutions, both in New Zealand and overseas. University of Canterbury, very importantly, NIWA, Landcare Research, Lincoln University, the Orca Research Trust, Smithsonian, where I'm a research associate. We're working with Italian colleagues, and I'll talk about that some more, and we are supported by Antarctica Museum, of course. And these are not in order of importance, they're just in order of how they fit around the logo. And of course, very important to us, especially with the whale work, is citizen science, so we have a very significant component of citizen science in our work. So, what actually makes the Ross Sea a special place? I mean, everybody goes on about it, the last ocean, blah, blah, blah. The Southern Ocean is a big place, so what is it about the Ross Sea that makes this extra special other than that just happens to be close to New Zealand? I want to start with some definitions. So this map shows New Zealand, and then if you fly straight south from Christchurch here, you get to Victoria Land, and then you get to Mimosa Sound, you get a scope base right there. Now, various people use various definitions for the Ross Sea. And this is the one I'm going to use, so it's not exclusive or definitive necessarily. So the Ross Sea is the embayment to the south of New Zealand that's bounded by the 3,000 meter contour that marks the drop-off of the continental shelf around Antarctica, so that's the blue line here. And it's bounded to the east by the 160 meridian, and to the west it's bounded either by 170 or 150, depending who you talk to. So that's basically it. So we're talking about the Ross Sea here. And then the Ross Sea region is often, how it's often called, is sort of this area here up to 60. And this is what CAMERA is interested in, up to 60 degrees. And then the Ross Sea sector is this whole area here, basically what New Zealand has as a claim under the Antarctic Treaty. Right. And I would like to talk first about what I think makes the Ross Sea unique. And I want to discuss that under three different headings. And these are the three headings that I've picked, and I'm sure there are others you could pick, but these are the ones I think make sense. So, first of all, the ecosystem, what's different about the ecosystem, the physical environment, and how do human activities impact these. Actually, I'm going to talk about the physical environment first, and then the ecosystem. Right, physical environment, and I swear this is not Photoshop, okay? This is not at all Photoshop, that's how it came out of the camera. That's an iceberg in McMurdo Sound in January. So the physical environment of the Ross Sea is different from the rest of the world in the way that the Southern Ocean is different from the rest of the world, but it's also different within the Southern Ocean and has some very unique characteristics. And one of these is bathymetry. So this map is from NOAA. So this is a bathymetry globe map. So we're here, you can see the New Zealand continent, most of which is submerged in that light color here. And this is Antarctica, and then this is the Ross Sea. And you can see that very large portions of it are quite shallow. They're part of the continental shelf, which is unusual. There's only two parts of the Antarctic, but that's the case. And I believe the Ross Sea is the largest part of the continental shelf that forms an oceanic ecosystem. And this map here shows that again. So the same map we just had, just blown up. So this is the Antarctic continent. So this bit is this bit here. And this is the Ross Sea ice shelf, which I haven't shown, which is apparently the size of France. But I checked it, and it's actually closer in the size to Afghanistan, but I guess people don't know how big Afghanistan is, so it doesn't make any sense. And here's the 3,000 meter contour, so that's that contour you see here where it drops off. And this shallowness, if you like, the fact that we're mostly over continental shelf, drives the biology of this area, because shallow meat is good, because it means productive. And it also means that predators such as seals and whales can dive to the actual bottom of the ocean and catch fish and stuff. Sea ice. So, as you'll know, I have tried very hard to keep text to a minimum on this presentation, but I thought this concept was so important, I really needed to write it down so you can take it away. And I have colleagues who can tell you much more about this than I can, because I don't work on sea ice. But sea ice is the key to productivity, and the Ross Sea, especially the eastern Ross Sea, is one of the only 2 areas in the Southern Ocean where there's persistent sea ice in summer. And sea ice is very, very important because it provides a substrate for things to grow on it. The algae, you know, the grass of the Southern Ocean, and then the krill, or the little orange sheep of the Southern Ocean, and then everything else needs to grow. So this is why sea ice is important. It's not only important when it's there, it's also important when it goes. Because as the sea ice decays, 3 things happen. First of all, the sunlight starts hitting the water, which causes photosynthesis to gear up. Secondly, all the nutrients are released from the sea ice, so that this could be aeolian deposits such as iron, as you know, the Southern Ocean is iron limited. It could be organic nutrients from the ice, and then thirdly, you get an algal bloom, and then you get an algal bloom, you get lots of krill, and then you get lots of killer whales, and everybody's happy, so it's great. So sea ice is very important. And now I'm going to talk about the ecosystem. Now, I'm a biologist, so this is not balanced, so we don't have the same number of slides for the 3 categories. I'm somewhat biased towards the megafauna, excuse me. That's a type C Ross Sea killer whale. Now, this is the slide, you wouldn't believe how often this comes up. This is a slide just for Tom and for Mark if you turn up. So, there are no walrus, no polar bears, and no sharks in Antarctica. I just want to make sure if you learn anything from this lecture, there are no sharks, no walrus. There's a walrus-free zone, okay? Please. Thank you. But we have plenty of penguins, so tons and tons of penguins. 2 examples shown here, the 2 most southern species of them all, the emperor penguin and the Adelie penguin. Or as I like to say, the introvert and the extrovert. This is an adult Adelie. So your Adelie is your average bluebird chip penguin, black and white, basic model, stand about. This is a baby. This was photographed in January at the Cape Bird colony, which has been monitored for a really long time. Lots of really good science done there. And Antarctica is home to about 30 to 40% of the world's Adelie penguins, so it's a really important habitat for Adelie penguins. And it's also, the Ross Sea is also home to a large proportion of the world's emperor penguins. And I've heard it said, don't ask me what percentage, because I don't know, but I think it's in the order of 15 to 20%. And also the penguins, the emperor penguins that you see in the Ross Sea apparently are genetically distinct from the rest of the Antarctic populations. And they include a very rare flying variant as well. We also have actual flying seabirds, like these beautiful snow petrels. Now this is a photo taken by my boss, Professor Brian Story, and he didn't take it in the Ross Sea, but we have the same species in the Ross Sea, so before you complain. All right. So these are very, very beautiful, and any of you who've seen them, you'll confirm that. So snow petrels, one of the most southerly breeding birds of any species. They breed down to 78 degrees, and they return. They're so philopatric, they show such high site fidelity that they won't come back to the same place for 40,000 years. They've excavated colonies and shown that the birds are breeding in the same place for the last 40,000 years. They're pretty impressive. And of course we have these. They're not beautiful at all. They're very, very interesting. Skuas, baby skuas. Even baby skuas is cute, you know. And my heart, of course, is with the mammals. So this is one of the very many marine mammals you get in the Ross Sea. The Waddell seal, Skidoo, Waddell seal. Very placid Waddell seal. And the Waddell seal is one of 6 species that you're likely to see in the Ross Sea. There's 4 that breed in the Ross Sea, the Ross seal, the leopard seal, the carabiner seal, and the Waddell seal. And then there's another 2, the Antarctic fur seal and the southern elephant seal, that move in to feed and take advantage of the seasonal productivity in summer. And they're also really cute, look at them. Those are 2 babies. fat. And the whale seal is not only the southernmost species on the Mars, it's incredibly graceful and consummate diver, and most of what we know about dive physiology has been worked out on Weddell seals in McMurdo Sound. This is a baby seal under the ice. And because they've got these amazing dive abilities, they can move straight into the fast ice where they live way away from killer whales and people and leopard seals and so on. Yeah, I just included that because I like it. Jenny likes it, so. And of course we have whales. So this is a minke whale. Minke whales are the smallest baleen whales. And when I say small, it's relative because the small baleen whale is still 10 meters long. So that is pretty large by most people's standards. And they're cool. So as soon as the sea ice opens up at all, they come in, they're in there, and they move into the ice. And this one has a pierce, this one has a pierce dorsal fin. I'm not sure what happened there. Unfortunately, minke whales are the last remaining target of the commercial whale hunt in the Southern Ocean, so there's currently no, if you want to talk about that, you should talk to my friend Paul, and so who knows what he doesn't know about minke whales isn't worth knowing. So this is a minke whale we saw on the Icebreaker channel last season. And of course, the most charismatic of all charismatic megafauna, the killer whale. This is a picture taken, absolutely awesome picture taken by my friend Paul, who I saw in the audience, and I won't embarrass him or make him stand up, but this is a really, really awesome picture. So, killer whales, especially these guys, are quite common around McMurdo and in the Ross Sea. Now, this is a graphic that was created by the folks at the NOAA and Southwest Fisheries, and it shows the common types of killer whales. So killer whales are like ice cream, they come in flavors. So you get alphas, bravos, and charlies in the Ross Sea. You get more types elsewhere, but this is what we like to see. And forget about these, because we don't see them much. These guys we do see around Scott Bays. And the ones we're most interested in are these, charlies, because they are a fish specialist. So and the reason, one of the environmental concerns is, of course, the toothfish fishery and overlap with killer whales, so these are the ones that we're most interested in. They also happen to be the most numerous of the killer whales, as far as we can tell. So we haven't got abundance estimates for any of these types, but these are the ones that we see most often. In the ratio of 30 to 1, 50 to 1 to bravos, these guys here, which are bigger. And these are still 4 to 6 meters long, so even as a dwarf, they're pretty small. The big males for these can get up to 10 meters. They're called minke whales. Now some hot of the press findings for those of you who haven't seen them. So this is some really exciting work that happened early in the year where we were able to show together with our Italian friends that charlies from McMurdo Sound go straight up from the Ross Sea down up to Northland and beyond to the Kermadec. And these are pictures of the same female charlie who was photographed repeatedly both in New Zealand and in McMurdo Sound. It's very, very cool work. It's just happened this year. Now, okay, enough about killer whales for now. There'll be more killer whales later. I want to talk about human activities. So one of the reasons that the Ross Sea is really special is because it's been a focal point of Antarctic exploration in human history. You're all familiar with this map, so this refers to the claims that people have made on the Antarctic continent. And of course, we have the Antarctic Treaty as a unique construct to govern the use and or not use of the Antarctic continent. So it's reserved for peace and science and no mining and so on, which is great. This is of course here the New Zealand claim, Ross dependency, the Ross sector Sea capped off at 60. And that's the capital of the Ross dependency, Scott Base. Although we're not allowed to call it anymore, right? Yeah, sorry. Okay. Anyway, that was 2013-14 where we had really extensive sea ice breakout, and I've heard it might look like that again this year, which would be really exciting. And of course, the Ross Sea, as you all know, this is Scott's side of Cape Evans and with Erebus in the background. So as you all know, of course, the Ross Sea was a major focus for historic exploration during the so-called heroic age. You know, where men were men and had beards and dressed up as women, they were bored and that kind of stuff. Apparently they're still dressed up as women, even though they don't need to, because we now have actual women in Antarctica, so I don't quite understand that bit, but that's okay. Anyway, so it's during this heroic age that Antarctica really became embedded in the cultural fabric, if you like, in the psyche of both New Zealand and in particular Christchurch, of course, because that's when it was all, people really caught the bug, if you like, was during that time, not that long ago. And one of the first things they did, the explorers did, other than explore, was science. And back in those days, doing science means killing things, of course. So science has always been part of this whole process from the very beginning, at least for the explorers and scientists and people like that. But before there were scientists and explorers, there were entrepreneurs, all right? So money talks. So even before there were lots of scientists and explorers going to Antarctica, there were people like sealers and whalers who wanted to take advantage of the untapped natural resources of the Southern Ocean. And this is a slide of blue whale that I got from my friend Paula Olsen. And it's estimated that between 1923 and 1930, in less than 10 years, there were 11,680 large whales removed from the Ross Sea sector, of which 9,330 were blue whales, which is 80%. And just to put that in perspective, the entire Southern Ocean population of blue whales alive at this time is estimated to be about 3,000 to 4,000. So they removed almost 3 times as many blue whales out of the Ross Sea sector alone than are alive today. So I think we can safely conclude that's called a local extinction event. So the Ross Sea sector is highly modified with regard to its stock of baleen whales, large whales. This is another example. This is not from the Ross Sea. So of course we have the Antarctic Treaty governing what happens on the continent, but the Antarctic Treaty didn't extend to the ocean. So the oceans were pretty much a free-for-all until Camelot came in, but this is pre-Camelot. So this is a fish called the marbled nodotine, Nodotinia rossi, and that was fished in the Atlantic sector, area 48, and it was wiped out in 3 seasons. So first season they caught over 400,000 tons, second season about 120,000 tons, third season there was nothing, and after that, this is what's called commercial extinction. This is a graph from a paper by Cocktail 2007. Now, just to give you an example, this is in 1,000 tons with 80,000 tons. The current total quota for the Ross Sea toothfish fishery for everybody is 3,000 tons, or around 3,000 tons. So that's about here. Okay, it doesn't even show on the graph. So you can see the kind of biomass that was removed in 1 season. So this kind of thing is not good. We don't really want to see this. This is not great. And as far as I know, the species never recovered from this. So we have CCAMLR. CCAMLR, the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, which is doing for the Southern Ocean what the Antarctic Treaty does for the continent. It's both very prescient and very old-fashioned at the same time, in the sense of you can see the word resources in the title here, and what that means is they specifically allow rational use of what they consider resources, i.e. not cuddly little animals, but things that, protein basically, things you can eat and hunt and so on. But it has to be done in a sustainable manner. You can't just go out and do rape and pillage like this thing. By the way, Camelot didn't come and do placed onto here, so they had nothing to do with it. So, on the other hand, so that's kind of old-fashioned, that's the old, let's take the world and subdue it view of things. But on the other hand, it is very, very prescient and incredibly modern in the sense that they regulate and they mandate an ecosystem approach. So it's not like, oh, you mustn't wipe out this species or whatever. They say, you can't change the ecosystem. You're not allowed to do anything that's wrecking that ecosystem. And it doesn't matter whether it's a primary or a secondary or tertiary effect of what you're doing. So, and they were particularly, and the reason I think they did that is because they're particularly concerned about krill fishing. And krill is really, really central to the web in the Southern Ocean. There's so many species that depend on krill. And they're worried, like, if you go and take out all the krill, what's going to happen to all these other animals? So they're not really worried that krill is going to go extinct. But if you drop the abundance of krill below a certain critical threshold, what's going to happen to the whales and the seals and the penguins and everybody who feeds on the krill? So that's why they have this very holistic, if you like, this ecosystem-based approach. Now, since 1996, we've had a toothfish fishery in the Ross Sea, which was started by New Zealand and is currently, I should have said there's 25 nations members of CCAMLR, and there's currently 12 member nations taking part in the toothfish fishery, sort of, not all 12 in every year, but overall It's about 12. And New Zealand used to take the biggest proportion of the catch, but that's sort of dropped off, and it's now, for example, South Korea takes part, Spain, the UK, Russia, other countries. I think Australia as well. So, this is toothfish. I have 800 kilos of toothfish in the freezer over in the PC2 lab, which I'm not going to eat. And I had to fight half of Scott base off because they wanted to eat my toothfish, but it's strictly for sampling. Anyway, this is the one of the toothfish we caught, and the average size of the ones we caught in McMurdo was 33 kilos, and some of them were so big they didn't fit on the measuring board, which was 1.50 meters. So they're pretty big. And that's not even the biggest you get, that's just what fitted on our hooks. This is one of Vitaly's boats with Janus. So what's up with the fishery? What's it going to do to the ecosystem? Now, because we know there are other things in the Ross Sea that we like toothfish, like Bodelsios, this is actually a bit unusual because no pinniped has ever been described eating out of the water, and they actually drag toothfish out of the water, and this is about a third of a toothfish that killed the night before, and they drag them out and they eat them later, which is pretty cool. Bodelsios really love toothfish, like you have no idea how much they love toothfish, they actually go to sleep on toothfish. And of course there's the Charlies, so this is a very important photograph. Again, this was taken by my friend Paul. This is only the second photograph ever published of a type C killer with a toothfish. In this toothfish, I reconstructed its length, it was about 1.50 meters before it got chewed up. So it's quite a large, solid toothfish. So Charlies really like toothfish as well. Not surprising, it's very high in calories, it's good. So what's it going to do? So this is a very simplified view of the Ross Sea ecosystem that was done by my friend Matt from NIWA. And everybody trots this out, so we all share this graphic, because everybody uses this because they're too lazy to do a new one. But so this is actually really good. So it's a simplified view of the Ross Sea ecosystem, and these are the primary producers down here somewhere, and then phytoplankton, and then the primary consumers, and then it all sort of moves into crown silverfish, and then they get eaten by the predators. We've already kind of hammered the whales, so that's no longer the way it was, and we don't know what it was because the whalers preceded the scientists by several decades. And now we're reducing the amount. We're not taking out, remember, this is a well-regulated fishery, it's not rape and pillage, and it's MSC certified. We are reducing the amount of toothfish. Now what's that going to do to the rest of the ecosystem? Or basically you could sum it up this way. This is not a situation we want to get into, okay? So we're trying to prevent this. This is not what's happening now, but we want to prevent this from the future, where you have reduction of availability to toothfish to dependent species, which is not allowed under CAMA, and also would be a bad thing, just in general, bad karma. Right. Now, I don't know whether you read the blurb, but one thing I wanted to try and communicate in this talk, something that's very dear to my own heart, is that this is not a simple binary. This is not a simple, like cowboy films, black and white hats and bad people and good people and so on. The fishing industry isn't the bad guy here. The reason we know so much about the ecosystem, the reason we know so much about the fishery, the reason the fishery is as well regulated as it is, one of the best regulated fisheries in the world, and much better regulated than many fisheries around New Zealand, much more precautionary than many fisheries around New Zealand, is because the fishing industry has been supporting science from day one. So this is showing some observers, they're doing measurements on this fish. So every so many fish, they take one out and it's completely sampled and everything. And then this is a tagging program. So tagging is one of the main tools for science. So what that means is they've got observers on board and they tag the fish, and the fish are they're handled very carefully and they return to the water quickly after being tagged. And tag recapture probability is something you can use to estimate the total amount of toothfish in the water. And this is what people have used to estimate the change in the spawning biomass, i.e. the amount of adult fish in the system. And that's actually very well known. And we've got about 25,000 tags in the water now. This is really extraordinary. I don't know whether I didn't know this because I don't know any fishing companies or fisheries biologists or anything like that, but this is an unbelievable level of detail and science that's gone into this fishery because they had that opportunity because they started it straight away from 96 onwards. And all the boats, not just New Zealand boats, but all the boats, international boats, have independent observers on board as well. So there's almost no IEU fishing. So I asked my friends at at NIWA, and they said there's probably been about, now, I can't remember whether they said 200 tons or 2,000 tons, but I think it was 200 tons of IUU fishing over the entire life of the fishery in the North Sea. That compares with catches, IUU catches on the rest of the Southern Ocean of other types of toothfish, both the Antarctic and the Patagonian, which is often 10 times the quota or more. So IUU really is not a problem, and part of that is because the fishery is so well observed and well regulated, and the fishing industry really deserves a huge amount of that merit. Now, based on this huge amount of really solid Kiwi science, and let's not kid ourselves about this, but New Zealand's did most of the work. New Zealand, together with the US, put a proposal to CAMOA to set up a marine protected area in the Ross Sea, and this has gone through several iterations now. This is the latest. So I've drawn the boundaries here in red, so this is the Ross Sea again, with the boundaries either here or here. And this is the proposed marine protected area with some sub-areas. And as you can see, it protects a large portion of the shelf, which is the part about the Ross Sea that makes it unique, and also parts of the slope, which are very protective. And the reason that the continental shelf is important because predators will feed in areas where they can dive to the bottom or near the bottom, and they can't dive to the bottom past this line because that's a 3,000 meter contour. And as far as I know, toothfish, as far as I know, killer whales can only go to about 700 meters, and what else is to about 800 meters, so that's it. So this plan will protect almost all the toothfish predators that we know of in the Ross Sea. It also includes the Banani Islands, which are a very, very important productivity hotspot and a feeding ground for humpback whales, which are coming from the tropics to feed at the Balanis. And maybe the beluga whales will come back as well. Now, hot off the press, you may have heard that we now have a Kermadec ocean sanctuary that just came yesterday, I think, or the day before, and I had to make a slide for it, so it's great. Really exciting. So the Kermadec area is up here, north of New Zealand, and the proposed sanctuary is going to be about 650,000 square kilometers, which is about half, or almost exactly half, the area of the proposed MPA. So the proposed MPA is going to be 1.25 million square kilometers, most of which is a complete no-take. So 1.14 million square kilometers will be complete no-take of the Ross Sea MPA. And I think that Charlie said a wee word to John Key, because as shown by our Italian friends, when they're done in the Ross Sea in the summer, they make a beeline for the Kermadecs. So hopefully they'll be able to commute between sanctuaries soon. I'd like to see that. Now, the difference between the Kermadec Ocean Sanctuary and the New Zealand and the Ross Sea MPA is that the Kermadec Ocean Sanctuary is in the New Zealand exclusive economic zone, so the government can just say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and they don't really have to ask anybody's permission outside of New Zealand to do that. So it makes it very easy. I don't know what took them so long anyway, but that's fine. Ross Sea MPA is a completely different thing, because as I said, the Southern Ocean is governed by CAMOA, which is an international consensus organization, and well, this is just some of the, I couldn't fit all the flags on, this is just some of them. So you can imagine trying to get agreement on values and priorities from these guys. It's not going to happen. So what we really need in order to get the MPA across the line is we need to have a basis for consensus, and that basis has to be objective and evidence-based. Now, I happen to know something that will do that, okay? The currency of Antarctic diplomacy is science. People who know me, they get sick of me saying that. But it's true. So if you're trying to get Russia and China and South Korea and Argentina and the UK and Chile and Uruguay and the Ukraine and who else, to Australia and New Zealand to agree on anything, and even Australia and New Zealand are fighting over this, as important as the MPA, well, the only way to do that is with science. It's not because science is better than values or because I don't personally believe we should just protect the Southern Ocean and be done with it. I don't need science to do that. But science is the only way that you get other people to do what you want. Now, I just wanted to, and as for the last part of the talk, I just wanted to talk about how science actually works, how science in Antarctica actually works. So this is a typical diagram that a scientist would make. You know, it's very orderly and it's very, very dry, very boring. So this is a model of an Antarctic research program, and I used my own research program just as an example. So let's say we have our Antarctic megafauna research program or sea ecosystem stuff. So we have the 3 partners, science partners, NIWA, Land Care Research, and University of Canterbury, and they're doing different things. So NIWA does ecosystem modeling and fish biology, Land Care does the penguins, and we do the really cool stuff. Okay, we do the marine mammals. And then we get together and we generate data with your work, and we get support, funding support from government and from Anzari, and we get logistic support from Antarctic New Zealand, and that's great. And I just think that this is very scientist-centric. Of course, we like to put ourselves in the middle of everything, and I also think it's actually very reduction. It's overly simplified, and I think reality is more like this. So I hand drew this thing because I couldn't come up with another way to do it. I think there's a lot more players, and I think there's a lot more contributors to what we need to do in the Southern Ocean than is normally acknowledged. And these people all have something to add that's of value. And I think if you're a scientist or if you just work in that space, you tend to overlook a lot of really important aspects of this work. And see, all these people work together, and I probably should have drawn more panels, but I kind of ran out of space. So please don't be mad with me if I left someone out. So these all work together in a very sort of mutually beneficial way to generate something that's much more important than data. Together we generate knowledge. Knowledge is much more important because it's pervasive and it can form the basis for decision making. Right, so this relationship and this collaboration creates all sorts of benefits, and I'm just going to go over some of them in turn. So, for example, universities and citizens, we have a very obvious mandate for education. So we teach people, we do outreach, we deliver science content for other things such as, in our case, Antarctic attraction. And we give public lectures to the interested public. And we also can set up citizen science projects, which in my case is very important because we get a lot of really good stuff for our whale study database from the general public. And so that generates fun. I hope so. Well, most people like to watch killer whales, so it's good. And the next one is a very important one. So the intersection between citizens and NGOs, for example, the Southern Ocean Coalition or WWF, Western Bird and so on. That is very, very important because by interacting with NGOs and this two-way street between citizens and NGOs, you create empowerment because the NGOs form a focus for citizens' concerns, and in turn they educate the public, but they're disseminating information in a way that is palatable and digestible, if you like, and they make sure that people understand about certain issues and very important things are not lost. And that creates empowerment, and it creates a policy-literate constituency. You can then make sure that the politicians do the right thing because they know what the issues are and they see them in a very specific way, in a complex way, not just in a black and white way. So that's a very important thing. Now that was a funny one. So you wouldn't think there would be much overlap between NGOs and the fishing industry, but I think there is one. And of course, sustainability is a core value for conservation and for NGOs. It's the most important thing. It also happens to make a lot of sense in business, especially if you are investing long-term. If you invest long-term, sustainability is the way to go. So I think there's some, and I also talked about the intangibles that the fishing industry contributes in terms of supporting science and combating IUU fishing. Now this is a really obvious one, so the government and the fishing industry, we shouldn't forget that New Zealand toothfish fishery creates a significant amount of revenue and creates jobs and maintains jobs and is a good thing. And as I said, it was MSC certified in 2010, so it's got that international stamp of approval. Now, the government, of course, is who represents us, or the government representatives are who are our voice in CAMLA and in other international bodies. And the science that we do, thanks to our incredibly awesome, efficient, and wonderful Antarctic National Program, thank you, is that creates not only the foreign policy content, but also the mana to have a voice in these international arenas where we actually have a say in what happens to the Southern Ocean. I think it's incredibly important, and that is based on having science excellence. And of course, APHET Central, CRIs, and universities are the main providers of research, science, we deliver science. So we're here to deliver world-class science, and I think New Zealand is proving again and again that they're a true leader in Antarctic science. And that is, again, feeds back into all these other things. So, and of course, all these different entities, it would be, I think, naive to assume that we're all going to agree on everything. And there's going to be tension between different parts of this partnership. But I think we can use that. I think that's a creative tension. I think something as important as the future of the Ross Sea and the future of the Antarctic is something that can only be achieved if we work as a team. Now, I know that team processes is central to Antarctic and New Zealand's processes on the ice, and it's, I think, for a good reason, because that's the only way you really get stuff done. And what it comes down to really is, I think what it comes down to is that we need to see we're all on the same page, because the question in the end is, what kind of future do I want for myself and for my children? And I think the answer to that is, I want a future where there's the Ross Sea, there's seals and there's killer whales and there's penguins, and the Ross Sea is that awesome place, this awesome vast wild place, and we preserve it for future generations. Thank you.